Hi, welcome to this video showcasing the collated Switch sales data for April 2021. So I decided, instead of doing with February and March 2021, those like random short software videos, I decided instead just to collate them all for each console. Because Nintendo is currently only supporting one console, and yes, the 3DS is still being reported by some websites like VG Charts. It's not really has any chance of overtaking any other console. So this video is primarily focused on the Nintendo Switch. And also the software sales I figured for the global and also for some of the other sales I did use country charts, but I also have my own collated for global software, where I estimate the global software sales. I'll be updating that quarterly, which is why I haven't uploaded it yet to another video. I'm gonna be updating it when maybe about a week after or two after the Nintendo June financial results come out. For yeah. Just to start off, let's look at global hardware and software. So Nintendo Switch sales in April 2021, as of the time I'm recording this video, on VG charts equaled 2,395,283 units, which is 8.3% up from 2020. The Nintendo Switch sales were the highest of any April, breaking the previous record set by the DS at about 2.2886 million units in 2009. The highlights for the software this month was Monster Hunter Rise, which continued to sell well from its late March debuts. Among Us continues to sell well, particularly with the new airship map releasing at the end of March, which boosted the game substantially. These digital games aren't appearing on the list for the rest of the video because I'll be basing most of the list afterwards off the country charts. But the global charts, this is why estimations based off my charts. So yeah, this is just my estimations of Among Us sales. New Pokemon Snap debuted at the end of April with a sales estimate on my flyers things as of now of 700,000 units sold for both digital and physical for its launch week. So our first comparison is obviously a comparison between the 9th-gen consoles Align launched, the Nintendo Switch, PlayStation 5, Xbox Series. So the Switch is already mentioned, sold 2.395 million units. The PlayStation 5 sold 986,499 units. And the Xbox Series sold 464,705 units. Currently, the PlayStation 5 leads substantially. This Nintendo Switch is also gaining lead on the Xbox Series. The question is, can the PlayStation 5 maintain ahead of the Switch for a long periods of time? And we'll also see how long the Xbox Series can last close to the Switch. Okay, so this is comparing to the Nintendo Wii in April 2021. So sorry if it's if the bottom of the graph's all cut off. It's just my screen that I'm recording. So in the last month, the Wii grew by about 3.3 million due to it's currently in December 2010. When aligned with the Switch, which is in April 2021. In the last year, the Switch has grown by about 11.5 million, which is very good for the Switch. And currently, the gap difference is in the favor of the Switch by nearly 3 million. Okay, just waiting for the graph to finish. Okay. Sorry again for the graph being cut off. It's gonna be like that for most of the video. So for the Switch versus DS, in the last month, the gap grew in favor of the DS by about 5.3 million. This was due again to the DS going into December 2008. The biggest December of all time. In the last year, the gap has grown about 666,000 units in favor of the DS. This is not too surprising, as this is the strongest year of all time, and the fact that the Switch is holding up against the DS in its strongest year is a very big achievement of itself. Currently, the DS leads by a little over 8.5 million units. So, to be honest, that's not too bad. It has one extremely strong year left. Then it has 2010. If it can last those 2 years, then it should overtake the DS. If you don't know my opinion for the best way the Switch to overtake the DS and PlayStation 2, instead of having the Switch Pro model, it has the price cut because of the way the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series are having their shortages. It's going to be mainly a battle with the Series S, which is the downgrade model, and the PlayStation 4, which is the predecessor to the PlayStation 5. So I feel like those are the Switch's main two competitors right now because of the shortages from the both models of the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X, which have like the 8K support and 120 frames per second. So I expect if the Switch has the price cut, and then so that it can knock out the competition from the Series X and PlayStation 4. And then the year after, when PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series is back in stock, if they reach the Pro models, then they would have an extra year, so maybe they could have a chance to upgrade the docked Switch Pro to 8K and maybe the handheld to 4K. If they can do that, then I could see it leaping past the DS and heading straight towards one of the comparisons, which is later in this video. So this is comparing the Nintendo Switch to the PlayStation 4. Up until about the start of last year, it's been a close battle between the Nintendo Switch and PlayStation 4. But the Switch is broken free, and I can assure you the Switch is going to be staying ahead and was probably going to skyrocket past the PlayStation 4. But that doesn't mean that the PlayStation 4 can't occasionally take a nab at the Switch. Particularly since it's not launch aligned. The PlayStation 4 is in December 2017. So in the last month, it's grown by about just under 1.6 million units. In the last year, the Nintendo Switch has grown just under 9 million units. And currently the gap difference is by about 11 million in favor of the Switch. This one's comparing the Nintendo Switch to the PlayStation 2, the best-selling console of all time. In the last month, the gap's grown in favor of the Switch by just below 2 million. But unlike other consoles, this is launch aligned completely, as the PlayStation 2 was released in Japan in March 2000. So it's completely launch aligned. So that means currently the PlayStation 2 is in 2004, April 2004. Which is roundabout during this mid period of 2004, the PlayStation 2 took a little bit of a decline, and the GameCube almost nagged it. But sadly, the DS came along and ruined the Game Boy Advance's sales. Sad to see. In the last year, the Switch has grown by about 9.5 million. In the gap difference currently between Nintendo Switch and PlayStation 2 is by about 13 million. But the question is, does PlayStation 2 have longevity on its side? So the question is, can the Switch have a life cycle nearly as long, if not as long, as the PlayStation 2? What I explained earlier in this video with the Nintendo DS, if that happens, I could see it having a life cycle not that much shorter than the PlayStation 2's. And this one was shown in a previous video. This is Nintendo Switch versus PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360. April 2021 update. So the PlayStation 3 is currently in December 2010, and the Xbox 360 is in December 2009. So they were released in different year. They'll release 1 year, but Xbox 360 was released 1 year before the PlayStation 3. In the last month, the gaps for grown in favor of the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 by just under 4 million. The gap change in the last year is in the favor of the Switch by about 4.6 million. Currently, the gap difference is about 1 million in the Switch's favor. The question is, now that it's competing against the PlayStation 3 Slim, will it be able to sustain with the Kinect launch in about a year's time? So that's all the global comparisons. This is the Nintendo Switch sales in the USA, hardware plus software. So Nintendo Switch sales equaled 849,994 units sold, 0.7% up from 2020. Nintendo Switch sales were the highest of any April since the DS in 2009, which sold 992,128 units. Highlights in the software this month are new Pokemon Snap, which is the third best-selling game this month, according to the NPD. Monster Hunter Rise also continued to sell good from its March sleeper, and Mario Kart 8 Deluxe continued to sell well as usual. Okay, so going into the ninth generation figures, the Switch, as already mentioned, sold just underneath 850,000 units. The PlayStation 5 this month sold 367,805 units, and the Xbox Series sold about 246,000 units. Currently, both the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series lead over the Switch. And it seems like the PlayStation 5 is extending its lead while they're selling about the same between the Xbox Series and the Switch. Keep in mind that even though I mentioned the Switch sales as April 2021, the month the Switch is currently in month 6 is August 2017. So these figures, so the figure on the top is different from the total amount which is being added up on the graph. So the PlayStation 5 is currently getting into the Nintendo Switch is currently almost into its holiday season, so it will probably overtake both consoles. But the question is, will they be able to keep their lead? The Xbox Series, the Xbox Series currently about the same as the Switch, except for that slight holiday boost in December, and the PlayStation 5 seems to be moving ahead. So we'll see how much they can propel and if they can get ahead of the Switch, particularly before the Switch fires, which I estimate about September 2019. Yes, it had a little bit of drop months during that time in March 2020, which was October 2019 and February 2020, but other months in between that and after were sold extremely well. This one is comparing the Nintendo Switch to the Nintendo Wii in the USA. It has been unlike in global, the Wii has managed to grow more of a lead than it did in previous comparison globally. So the Wii is in the same month, December 2010. So in the last month, the Wii has grown by over 1.5 million. In the last year, the Switch has grown by just under 2.3 million. Currently, the gap difference is about 4.7 million in favor of the Wii. So yes, I see the Switch catching up to the Wii this year. But I would say during the holiday season, because the Wii still has a little bit of a substantial lead. So it's gonna be a little bit of a tough fight. This one's comparing to the Nintendo Switch to the Xbox 360. So the Xbox 360, as you know, had a slower start, and it launched on November 2005. It's currently in November 2009. So currently in the last month, December 2009. Sorry, that was my mistake. So in the last month, the gap's grown in favor of the Xbox 360 by about 477,000 units. In the last year, the Switch has extended its lead by just under 5 million, like less than 5,000 off 5 million. In currently the gap difference is just under 11 million in favor of the Switch. Just waiting for the graph to finish. Okay, there we go. Okay, now for the Switch vs DS in USA. This is another very interesting comparison. As currently here it looks very close, and the DS can just chew it off like it did in the global initially. But the holiday season didn't really match the expectations that the Switch had. So the DS now has some catching up to do. So the DS once again is in December 2008. In the last month it's grown by about 1.8 million units, and in the last year it's grown in favor of the DS by about just under 470,000 units. But currently the Switch leads by about 1.1 million units. And the difference here is that the DS, even though globally it peaked in 2008, the DS peaked in 2009, so we're not even into the DS's peak year yet. We have an even stronger year coming up from the DS, which over the next year. So we'll see how the Switch fares against it. The question is here, can the DS catch the Switch by December 2009 before it starts to drop off? Because currently, as you can see, the Switch is ahead by 1 million, and the DS is currently going to propel slightly for 2009. So, is it gonna overtake the Switch? But I think it's pretty much a given by now that the Switch will outsell the DS in USA, despite contrary to beliefs, which are still being said that it's not gonna outsell. Particularly, if you go to VG charts, some people don't say there's not much potential because it is so far away from the targets. So yeah. So let's go on to the next comparison. So this is the end of the USA comparisons. Just for the non-gen comparisons, I'm going to be splitting it across the Nintendo, Sony, and Microsoft videos. So for Nintendo, I'm including the global and USA. For Europe, which we're going into now, I'm going to be putting that in Sony's video, which is going to be the next video in this little April series. And Microsoft's going to get Japan's. It's going to be in Microsoft's video. The Japan. So for the Nintendo Switch sales in Europe, April 2021, I used a variety of sources. I looked at different Europe country charts. I didn't look at all of them because some of them come out very late. I did stall for the NPD because that would be my 100% data source. But Europe, it's not as important because there are a bunch of countries in Europe and there are a lot of big very big markets in Europe that report, like the UK for example. Okay, let's get into it. So Nintendo Switch sales equaled 516,163 units sold, which is 18.5% down year on year. This is due to the COVID-19 and Animal Crossing boost from last year, which is not so prevalent this year. The highlights in software for this month are, as expected, new Pokemon Snap, which charted on many of the country charts in Europe, including UK, Italy, France, Spain, and more. It even managed to top the UK, France, and Switzerland on its launch week. Monster Hunter Rise is also continuing to top the charts, particularly during the first half of April. It continued in the top 10 for most countries, which reported for Europe throughout April. Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury continued to sell well all round, as well as some of the other Nintendo evergreens, including Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, which particularly did well in Switzerland, France, and UK, and Animal Crossing New Horizons, which particularly did well in UK, France, and Italy. so the first comparison we have for Europe is Nintendo Switch versus the Nintendo Wii in Europe. So this is a little bit of a different situation to the US. In the US, the Wii was able to grow its lead, and globally, it was that the Switch was able to catch up fast. But in Europe, it's a little bit of a different situation. The Wii kind of had in ratio, a similarly to global, but the Switch didn't have the speed that it did globally to catch the Wii. So it's a little bit of a slower process. So we'll see. So also the Wii released in December 2010. So currently the Wii's in January 2011, which is why the Switch in the last month the gap grew in favor of the Nintendo Switch by about 100,000 units. In the last year, the gap has grown by about 1.8 million units in favor of the Switch, and currently the Wii leads by about 5 million units. So yes, I expect the Switch to catch the Wii, as it is currently ahead of the PlayStation 3. The next comparison is currently close fights. In the last month, the gap grew in favor of the Nintendo Switch by about 228,000 units. And also, another note is that the PlayStation 3, although it launched in November 2006 for Japan and USA, in Europe, it launched in March 2007, so the holiday seasons perfectly align. So therefore, the PlayStation 3 is in April 2011. In the last year, the gap's grown in favor of the Nintendo Switch by about 1.8 million units. And currently, the Switch leads by about 2.25 million units. So I'm pretty sure the Switch will outsell the PlayStation 3, just because it's handling the PlayStation 3 Slim, and also with the COVID boost and the continued sway that it's still having on Europe. It's probably gonna be an easy victory for the Switch. And with longevity-wise, I think the Switch can have a life cycle at max 10 years is my max. At lowest, I could say PlayStation 3, Xbox 360 length. So about 7 to 8 years is my lowest prediction. Realistically, I'd say 8 to 9 years though. Okay, so I'm not gonna be comparing the Switch to the DS, unlike for USA and global, because of the way the Switch sells in Europe. So instead, I'm comparing it to the Game Boy. So the Game Boy is one of those consoles that had a slow start in pretty much all regions, and it didn't really sell well. It didn't really sell well all around until the Game Boy Color released, 9 years after launch. And so it's mainly an uphill battle with the Switch, but it's a little bit of an exception for Europe, because it's not really the Switch's strength, as we all know. But yeah, it's pretty much a solid battle. So in the last month, the gap's grown in favor of the Nintendo Switch by about 336,000 units. And the last year, the Switch has grown by about 4.8 million units, and currently the Switch leads by about 7.7 million units. Okay, so that's the end of Europe. We're going on to Japan. So, Nintendo Switch sales equaled 598,479 units sold, which is a 65.8% increase year on year. Despite the boost from COVID-19 and Animal Crossing, there were not many, and the fact that there were not many major new releases for the Switch in April 2021. The Switch managed to get over 65% up year on year, so that's very impressive for the Switch, and it really gives hope for longevity in the Switch's case. So for the software, the highlights in the software was this one will actually give hard numbers because Famitsu reports them. So Monster Hunter Rise was the top game of April on the Nintendo Switch. Actually, it was the top game overall in April at 771,000 units. New Pokemon Snap debuted on the last week of April during the Golden Week, with a decent launch of 147,000 units. Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury also sold well in April, selling over 100,000 units. Sorry, 100,000 units. Sorry about that. So 100,000 units. Moving on to some one-on-one hardware comparisons, we have Nintendo Switch versus Nintendo 3DS in Japan. So, just a spoiler alert, I'm just comparing the Nintendo Switch to the top 3 Japanese consoles. So, with the third place being to the 3DS. So, in the last month, the gap's grown in favor of the Switch by about 503,000 units. In the last year, Nintendo Switch has grown by about 3.5 million units. And the gap difference, 1.287 million units. For the Switch. So after its first 3 years, 2011, 2012, and 2013, the 3DS kind of dropped off. And also, I know that the 3DS launched in February 2011 instead of March, but it was the last week. And I really wanted this comparison to be launch aligned for the holidays, so I aligned the 3DS to March by adding that last week of February over to the March sales. So please forgive me for that, or if you don't mind, then that's good, okay. So yeah, I see the Switch easily surpassing the 3DS. This 3DS is in 2015, and it's pretty much not really going to make a recovery, and it's most likely that the Switch will outlast the 3DS in general, so there's not really too much to talk about, just saying the Switch is gonna skyrocket past the 3DS. Next comparison, a little bit hard to see, but it is Nintendo Switch versus Game Boy in Japan. Second best-selling console of all time, but even though it is the second best-selling console of all time, it's still won on longevity. It's which is why we see the Game Boy not really super competitive, but we need a comparison, and it's kind of one of those longevity comparisons which get more interesting later in the life cycle, particularly when it's very close. So in the last month, the gap's grown in favor of the Nintendo Switch by about 513,000 units, and the last year it's grown in favor of the Switch by about 4.6 million units. So currently, the Switch leads by almost 11 million units. So yeah, I have seen people who say it's not necessarily gonna pass the DS, and the Game Boy sold 2 million off the DS. So considering this, I think it can pass the DS. I think it's likely. I can't say certain, but I'm gonna say it's very likely, and almost 100% to pass the Game Boy. In Japan. The last comparison of the day, we have the Nintendo Switch versus Nintendo DS. So we're comparing the Switch to the best-selling console of all time in Japan. The last month, the gap grew in favor of the Switch by about 279,000 units. In the last year, the Nintendo Switch sold 2.5 million units. Currently, the DS, the gap difference is in the favor of the DS by just under 6 million units. So keep in mind the DS peaked very early in Japan. It peaked in 2006 and dropped a little bit in 2007. 2008, the sales crashed down. It was still top of the market, but the sales were very low compared to 2007. And 2009 was lower again. So expect the DS to continue declining, and probably even at a faster rate from here on out. Thank you for watching. Just remember, before you leave, please like and subscribe, and if you're interested, join the Discord, the link's in the description. And also comment what other comparisons you would like to see in our upcoming Sony and Microsoft console comparison videos. Thank you for watching. Bye.